Board of Supervisors together, but before we do, I just mentioned one thing as I indicated in my email earlier this afternoon. If you're so inclined, please keep the Vice Chair and his family in your thoughts and prayers as he continues down this road to recovery. So with that, we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we will have the reading of the notice, please.
The organizational meeting of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, composed of 38 members, will convene at the Marathon County Courthouse Assembly Room, 500 Forest Street, Wausau, on Tuesday, July 18th at 7 p.m., and the agenda was duly signed and posted.
And thank you. And I would like to request everyone put their electronic devices, cell phones, and others on silent or vibrate as to not be an interruption to the meeting, and I thank you for your compliance. And we'll proceed to roll call and ask everyone, please sign in. Thank you, and I'd like to welcome all of the visitors that we have with us this evening, also along with the viewing audience. So thank you for your interest in Marathon County government. We'll move on to item B, education and presentation and/or reports. Standing committee chairpersons or designees. Any reports from standing committee chairpersons? Supervisor Robinson, please.
Human Resources, Finance, and Property met earlier today, and I just wanted to update you relative to the ARPA reconciliation. We went through money spent to date, and we will be bringing a resolution into the county board at our August meeting, taking about $10 million plus dollars that was allocated and reallocated into the capital or into the ARPA fund, and will be eligible for redistribution for capital and other eligible projects. We will also be bringing in the preliminary proposed capital improvement plan at that meeting for your review and discussion.
Any other standing committee chairs or designees? Okay, seeing none, we will proceed to the consent agenda. Approval items C8 through item C12C. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Rosenberg, second by Supervisor Leahy. Any discussion? Supervisor Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would ask that we separate for separate vote item 11C.
11C has been pulled from the consent agenda and will be voted on after the vote is taken on the motion to approve the remaining consent agenda. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we will pursue. Just a second. Clerk has to make a change on item 11C separate. All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll... Oh, fine. All right, we'll proceed to vote on everything except for items 11C.
Supervisor Hardinger, can you enter your vote, please?
Yes.
And then Supervisor Leahy and Supervisor Rosenberg.
I just went away.
Can you just tell me your vote?
Yes. Yes, I can tell you my vote. My vote is yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. Now the clerk needs to enter item 11C separately, so give her and me a second. Okay, what is your pleasure? Excuse me, what is your pleasure? Rib Mountain Metropolitan Sewage District Commission, Craig Mortensen, what is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Robinson, a second by Supervisor Van Cray. Any discussion? Supervisor Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason I pulled that from the consent agenda is I had the pleasure of working with Mr. Mortensen on the Cronenwetter Water Utility Committee. And what I discovered, that was from the April of 2021 through about April of 2022. And in my time sitting at those utility meetings, I found that the utility committee, and well, Mr. Mortensen is not actually on any of sewer service, he's on a well and septic. We have a bad manganese and biofilm in our water down in Cronenwetter, but our PFAS are at 2 parts per trillion, which is very, very low. The people in Cronenwetter, I came to find out when I was elected and served on that committee, the utility committee, that they were getting nothing from that particular standing committee as far as putting any effort into mitigating the problem of high manganese and biofilm. And the people, the residents, I came to find out, reported it to the DNR, and the DNR came down heavy on them. So it came and told them they will mitigate the problem by such and such a time. So had we, to me, it was very quickly that I found out that the current group of members of that utility committee, with half of them not even being on the metropolitan service, they were on well and septic, they were making terrible, terrible decisions on our behalf. We put in a metering station to try to, and we were going to purchase water through an intergovernmental agreement with Rothschild to at least offset the biofilm and the manganese. And then PFAS came around and that got held off. Now we're in the process of putting in a multi-million-dollar filtration plant that could have been done 10 years ago for $500,000-$600,000. So I am not going to approve having Mr. Mortensen sit on anything involving metropolitan sewer and water, because my experience with him, serving with him at a local municipality level, showed me that he just did not perform at the level that I would expect a member to perform. So I will not be voting for approval of him. And I urge my colleagues to ask Administrator Leonard to seek another candidate for that position. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Supervisor Shafinsky.
Thank you, Chair. In response to Supervisor Straub's comments and observations, and of which I'm not party to Rib Mountain at all, but I think in a due diligence manner, some serious issues have been raised. I think at a minimum, we owe it to everyone concerned to investigate those issues and not proceed today with any type of a vote. I think that this needs to be held, investigated, and then come back before this board with some type of a report, and then we either proceed or don't proceed. Thank you.
Okay, I'd ask the Corp Counsel to provide a little bit of insight as to how this appointment comes to the county board, but the recommendations come from the appropriate department. So,
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is an appointment that you would be that you're being asked to approve today under Wisconsin Statute 200.09 that empowers the county to appoint members of a metropolitan sewerage district. Because we have an administrator form of government, our administrator receives a recommendation from the Metropolitan Board. In this case, they made a recommendation to Administrator Leonard to recommend this appointment. Then the administrator makes the appointment subject to your approval today. So that's the procedural method by which this gets to you pursuant to statute.
Supervisor Boots.
Call the question.
Question has been called. Is there any objection to question being called? There's no objection. Is there a second? Is there a second to the question being called? Supervisor Rosenberg with a second. Okay, there's no discussion. A yes vote by 2/3 of the individuals on the board here will approve the question being called. A no vote or less than 2/3 majority will continue debate. Is everybody clear what you're voting on? Again, a yes vote with a 2/3 majority ends debate, and we will proceed to vote on the appointment. We will proceed.
Supervisor Hardinger?
No.
Supervisor Marshall?
Again, it says, sorry, something's wrong. No.
And we'll proceed. Two-thirds is 20. 20 is needed to end debate. Debate will continue. Supervisor Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I tend to agree with Supervisor Shafinsky that a little bit more should be brought by the Administrator Leonard to the board so that we can have some further details onto how he has served the Rib Mountain Metropolitan Sewage District. Based on my experience in Cronenwetter, sitting on the utility committee for a year, you don't have to take my word for it, but I think others should be more given more information. Let's put it that way. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Supervisor Shafinsky.
More of a question. Thank you, Chair. Would it be appropriate to, whether it be a motion or whatever the mechanism would be, that we direct the administrator to fully document the questions that have been raised here and go back to the Metropolitan Commission of Rib Mountain and ask them for documentation, rebuttal, I guess a clear discussion of the issues. We're talking about somebody and what they did or may not have done. They're not here. We haven't heard their side of the story. I know nothing, but I think it's important that we get information, and I'm asking really, how do we go about doing that?
Well, you have right now, there's a motion on the floor to approve. Administrator Leonard, please.
Sure, Mr. Chair, just to make sure everyone kind of understands what my process is here. In your packet on page 27 is a letter from the sewerage district indicating that they're requesting reappointment of Mr. Mortensen. I certainly can go back and ask the commission if they have concerns with Mr. Mortensen continuing to serve, because this is a reappointment. My sense from the letter is that they voted unanimously to reappoint him to serve in that capacity. The letter CCs the city of Mosinee, the village of Cronenwetter, the village of Rothschild, village of Weston, and the other, the other sewerage district commissioners. If you would like, I can reach out to make sure that they all received the letter and concur with the recommendation to reappoint, but this is a reappointment of Mr. Mortensen, just so everyone is kind of aware. Historically, my understanding of our longstanding historical process is that the sewerage district makes a recommendation of who to appoint, whether it's a vacancy or reappointment, and I'm unaware of an administrator ever making a different recommendation. That said, if you ask me to undertake any action or investigation, I'm certainly willing to do that. Just would need some specifics as to exactly what you're looking for me to do.
Okay, Supervisor Longenhahn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I get a explanation as to who makes up the Metropolitan Sewerage District Board, the one that sent the letter in our packet here? In addition to that, is it my understanding that Mr. Mortensen is the Village of Cronenwetter's current representative, or am I misunderstanding that? So 2 questions. Thank you.
Administrator Leonard, if you've got the answers to this question, fine now.
Off the top of my head, I am not. I'm not aware of the answers to how those appointments are made. Just looking at their website, they have each of their commissioners referenced. I can look into that.
The Corp Council will also address the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just again, referring to State Statute 200.09, the Metropolitan Sewerage District, this is also in our rules relative to the Rib Mountain Metropolitan Sewerage District, which is in 2.06 as a non-governance committee. The Rib Mountain Metropolitan Sewerage District is appointed by the county administrator, and it's comprised of 5 members referred to as commissioners. So the appointments come through this body, through the administrator. There are 5 members. And my understanding of the historical practice is that they are historically recommended to the administrator in the way that they were in this way, although statute doesn't say what that process looks like.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Straub, third and final time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also like my colleagues to understand also that it came to be, again, while I was on trying to work Cronenwetter for the best interest of their water utility, there had been a study by a consulting firm to study the Bull Junior floodplain. The acronym for that company was AECOM, A-E-C-O-M. So I came in, didn't know anything about the details of that particular study. but it was projected that the Bull Junior floodplain was going to be shifted. FEMA was going to alter the 100-year floodplain boundaries. And at that time, I had noticed, I was chairing the Community Life Infrastructure Public Property Committee, and it was brought to my attention by a constituent who brought it to my attention and said, did you know that there was a test well done in 1984 in the area where it's projected for the floodplain to come out, and that's going to open up for development, and don't you think it would be a good idea to redraw our wellhead protection overlay district map? And I said, that's a wonderful idea. Yes, we should do that, and we should do that immediately. And so I brought that to the board's attention, and the president shifted it right over to the utility committee. So if it wasn't the astute thinking of the utility committee that was worrying about anything, it seemed to me. But in the end, when I brought it to their attention, and Mr. Supervisor Longahan, I think you actually had something with a wellhead protection at one of your meetings, perhaps, but I'm not sure. But nonetheless, when the
I'm going to stop you because we're getting off topic, and the topic is the individual appointment to the Rib Mountain Sewer District and the point of order. So,
Sure.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, we will proceed to vote.
Supervisor Hardinger?
No.
And we'll proceed. And the motion is defeated. And so we'll move on to Tax Incremental Finance District Task Force appointments. Item D13. I'll have the clerk read the appointments first, because they were not in the packet prior.
Per the ordinance passed on June 20th, the membership of the task force shall include 9 members, including 5 county board members, 2 local elected officials, 1 representative from a local taxing district, and 1 business community representative as follows: Supervisor David Oberbeck as chair, Supervisor Jacob Longenhahn, Supervisor Gail Marshall, Supervisor Tom Rosenberg, Supervisor Alan Drebeck, Jerry Fitzgerald, clerk of the town of Emmett as a local elected official, Lisa Rasmussen from the city of Wausau as a local elected official, to be determined, a representative from the local taxing district, and Gene Schultz, CPA, as business community representative.
So what is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Leahy and seconded by Supervisor Shafinsky. Any discussion? Supervisor Sandalski.
Thank you, Chairman Gibbs. I will be voting no on this appointment, on the task force appointment. It's not because the representatives that were appointed, but it's because I don't feel the businesses are fairly represented on this task force. There's only 1 business representative being appointed, and also it's under a to be determined status. So our businesses are pretty much the lifeblood of our economy, so I believe they should have a fair representation on this task force. Thank you.
I would just respond that the ordinance ordinance as passed by this board calls for the makeup as represented, and that is the representation that I brought forward. Any further discussion? Supervisor Longenhahn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But the TBD does mean, just to confirm, that there will be an individual brought forward for that appointment, correct?
I just have not gotten the confirmation from the individuals that I've asked as to whether or not their willingness to serve at this point.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote.
Supervisor Hardinger?
Yes.
Thank you.
And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. And we'll move on to resolutions from the Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee and Public Safety Committee to create a deputy sheriff in the Marathon County Sheriff's Office to provide contracted services to Rib Mountain. Resolution 35-23, item E14. Motion by Supervisor Mask and second by Supervisor Langenhan. Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote.
Supervisor Hardinger?
Yes.
Thank you.
And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item F, Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee, Budget Transfer, Wisconsin's Elections Commission, Subgrant for Absentee Envelopes. Resolution 36-23 does require a 2/3 majority. What is your pleasure? Motion by Leahy, second by Robinson. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote.
Supervisor Hardinger?
Yes.
Thank you.
And we'll proceed. Oops, Supervisor Marshall.
Since I voted. Yes.
Thank you.
And now we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. Moving on to adoption of the budget assumptions, item F16, budget assumptions for the 2024 budget process, resolution 38-23. What is your pleasure? Motion by Robinson, second by Supervisor Boots. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we will proceed to vote.
Supervisor Hardinger?
Yes.
Mine's yes.
And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. Moving on to Environmental Resources and Executive Committee, approval of the letter to Governor Evers and the state legislature regarding local control. Resolution 37-23. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Drabeck, second by Supervisor Cavelli. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote.
Supervisor Hardinger?
Yes.
Thank you.
And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. We are down to item number H, closed session. If somebody wishes to read the Supervisor Robinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to go into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 1985, parent 1, parent subparent E, for the purposes of deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public property, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified business purposes whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, to wit, review of appraisals for and discussion of strategy regarding the potential purchase of private property adjacent to county-owned properties. And request a roll call.
Okay, roll call is second by Supervisor Marash. Is there any discussion? Okay, we will go to roll call vote. Again, please vote. And just a note to any individuals, any supervisors that are attending virtually, you will be moved into the waiting area and be allowed back in as soon as we return into open session, if that is the approval of the board. We still
Supervisor
need-
Hardinger?
Yes.
Yes.
And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. We are in closed session, and we will not be using the microphones, so please turn the microphones off